Access to high-quality early childhood education is one of the biggest predictors of success in teens and adults, but we don't treat it that way. The U.S. ranks 35 out of 38 when it comes to public funding for 0 to 5, and of all of the money we spend on education, just 3% goes to early childhood education. Clearly, when it comes to children, the earlier we invest, the bigger the payoff, so why aren't we investing in it? Join us today as we take a look at the early childhood education with the 2020 documentary No Small Matter. You're listening to Real Stories, Real Problems with Rachael and Roxanne.
Hi, Rachel. How are you doing today?
I am good. How are you?
I'm excited to talk about this documentary. Not for the least reason that it's narrated by Alfre Woodard, one of my favorite actresses.
I know, I love her. I was so excited to see that she was the one who was narrating
I
this.
know.
Oh, but this was a 2020 documentary, and I looked and I just couldn't find anything going on in 2020.
It was a boring year. I mean, really. I hardly remember it.
No, obviously 2020 was the COVID-19 pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and that was also the year that Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin murdered George
Mhm,
Floyd by kneeling on his neck. And a video of that incident went viral, and the four officers were subsequently fired.
mhm.
Um, that was the year that violent protests broke out in Kenosha, Washington, following the shooting of Jacob Blake, who's a 29-year-old, by a police officer. That was the year that the Senate confirmed Amy Coney Barrett as a Supreme Court justice, 52 to 48, as the Senate Democrats failed to stop that process. And
Oh, there it is. I
in,
just blocked it out. That's all.
in happier 2020, Bong Joon-ho's Parasite became the first South Korean film to receive an Academy Award, and it won 4 awards and became the first non-English language film to win Best Picture.
Well, I'd have traded that for pretty much any of the others. God.
Yeah. Uh, so 2020 was a garbage fire of a year.
It was.
But we got this documentary about early childhood education out of it. So
And
let's
that's what counts. So yeah, let's do it.
so this I loved the opening of this documentary where they start with the guy talking very stuffily, and then Alfre Woodard's like, "Stop. Nope, we can't keep going like that. It will lose you. We got to make this interesting and fun."
Right?
Uh, and that moment in and of itself was a nod to the way that you have to do early childhood education. It has to be entertaining and fun and hands-on and
Mhm.
interactive for the kids.
Right.
And they were kind of opening this with saying people are the same, kind of age range be damned. Let's make this interesting and fun for you.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as somebody who's been in education for 30 years, I mean, that's why I was always, and oh, I hate the word edutainer, you know, and I taught college students who hopefully would have more of a, but when I saw these things that these little kids knew, and how they adapted, I was like, wow, my students weren't like that and they were adults. Oh, that was great. It did my soul good to watch that. It really did.
Yeah, this was a fun documentary, and they kind
Mhm,
of took us through. We saw a bunch of stuff that happened at the University of Washington and Seattle.
mhm.
We talked to a bunch of people in Nevada. We saw some people in Waco, Texas. So we kind of touched, in a variety of points in the United States. And the thing that this documentary had that I don't think I've seen anywhere else was the number of experts that were
Yeah.
part of this. Like there were at least what, 20, 25
Oh,
experts
easily.
who were part of
Real
this.
heavy hitters too. I mean, these weren't just schmoes off the street. These are Ivy League educated people. I'm looking at the list of them I mean, these are people I've read articles by these people. So
And it's
yeah.
experts from a variety of places. So they talked to Jeffrey Canada, who's the founder of Harlem Children's Zone, but they
Mhm.
also talked to several military major generals and rear admirals and things like that to talk about how education is an important part of building towards a robust military. They
Which
talked
we
to
need
people
now more than ever. Yeah.
who were pediatricians and professors, and they
Mhm.
talked to a guy who is a prison director, and they talked like they brought in experts at a rate of that I have not seen in documentaries up
Right.
to this point. So it was really nice to see that they really know their stuff and that this was a topic that a lot of people wanted to participate in, and that it seems early childhood education, the understanding of how that benefits society and those children seems pretty clear across the board. Like 89% of all people agree that we should be funding childhood education and that this is an important part of having a vital economy and a, functional society and all of that. So that was it was nice to see that everybody kind of was coming together for this common ground on this topic.
Definitely.
The thing that I had thought about, the reason that I recommended this for our podcast was in large part because they talked about how they pay the teachers and how they invest in childhood education, and the grand answer is that they really don't. We are expecting teachers to work at poverty level wages
Right.
and use have essentially very little funding to build what is the most important part of education for children,
Hmm.
and they're expected to do it on a shoestring.
Well, and we've known for years that teachers often go out to, like office supply stores and all that, and they'll buy their own supplies and bring them in for the kids to use because, there's what, two notebooks for 25 kids or 40 kids or whatever, and passing textbooks around because, there's not so they've got the odds stacked against them all over. It's really frustrating.
Yeah, and they addressed that also from the parents' point of view. That,
Hmm.
that parents need this support. This is not a luxury for parents to be able to have two working adults in a household, which is really, you need at least that to be able to have a functional household where you can pay the bills in today's world.
Sure.
So they have to have this, and they are paying so much money to put their kids in early childhood education. 28 states, it in 28 states in the United States, it costs more to send your kid to preschool than it does to send your kid to college.
Yeah.
So that's more than half of the country is paying more for early childhood education than for college. But both at early childhood education and college level, none of those teachers are making any money.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
so I'm really wondering, where is this money going?
Excellent question. Yeah, that's a really good question, and I don't know.
I would assume, because I've worked in insurance for years, that a fair amount of
Mm,
that money is going towards liability coverage and,
mm,
building coverage and stuff. Insurance is not cheap and it's not ever going to get any cheaper. Like that's just
right.
the nature of the industry. And I'm assuming that a fair amount of this is going to administrative positions, people who are doing the paperwork on the back end to make sure that all of this can be up and running.
Hmm.
But it still doesn't, like I'm not understanding, because if you've got a class of 15 kids, 15 early education level kids, and they're each paying 2 grand a month to be there, and those are the numbers that they were talking about within this
Yes.
documentary. And
Hmm.
from when my own child was young enough for that, that's about on point. We paid between $1,700 and $2,000 a month to put our daughter in preschool.
Hmm.
Um, so that's $30,000 a month to pay rent on a facility and insurance and teacher salary and,
Right.
you know, gas and electric and water and all of that. That feels like it should cover everything. And
And
yet,
the fact that the teachers are being paid the same annual salary as the office assistants, it's like I'm sorry, there's a disparity here because the teachers are by far the biggest asset in that program. The teacher that worked in the yellow room was she was so enthusiastic, and I was like, God, I hope she doesn't burn out, like, before she's 40, but you need a special kind of person to do that, and they don't come around very often. And
Well,
I mean, yeah.
and realistically, in all education, from the youngest preschooler to, PhD level college graduate,
Hmm.
what you are selling is the education, the teacher, the person giving you the information. Like that's what I can buy books and read them at home. If all I wanted to
Yeah.
know was the words, that I can do that at home very affordably. You are paying to have an expert who is trained and educated in this topic, in this subject, to make learning exciting and fun and something that you can grasp. And the difference between a good teacher and a bad teacher is literally life changing.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, it can change your goals. It can change the way that you think, and it certainly can change the way that you feel about education in general. If you have a terrible teacher when you're in like second or third grade, you're going to be colored by that for quite a while. I know that from personal experience. Yeah, so yeah.
Yeah, what they were talking to the parents about, that every moment from the moment a child is born is a learning moment, and it's a
Yes.
time when they're being educated. And they talked about um, how even with little kids, they talked about the 30 million word gap,
Hmm.
which that they had talked about by age 3, children from higher income families have heard 30 million more words than their low income peers.
Right.
And there has since been, this was referencing a study that was done in the 80s, and that they extrapolated out this 30 million word gap. And that study has been referenced more than 8,000 times in various publications, talking about how important it is that we talk to kids. And it's 100%, it is absolutely true.
Mm.
The more you talk to a kid, the more you engage with the kid and interact with the kid, the smarter they will be, the more aware, the more they will develop.
Hmm.
But there's also been some follow-up research that has said that word gap is maybe not 30 million, it's maybe closer to 4 million.
Hmm.
There's been some things that have followed up since then. But even like by age 5, they said wealthy kids have, or higher income families have spent 1,300 more hours in libraries and museums and other like educational interactive experiences with their kids than kids from lower income families. And they talk about how that impacts their educational enrichment.
Yeah,
And it's true.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and it's pretty. The basic reason that higher income families, their children has have been exposed to more words is simply the parents have the time to talk to the kids. They're not both working two or three jobs, passing the kid off between the two, or maybe they're with grandma for half of the day or something like that. It's a lot different. The home dynamic is so different. It's a lower income family. The mom can't afford to spend the whole day, cuddling with the child and reading along with them, in the book, pointing to the words as she reads aloud. And you need that. You need that kind of interaction. Not all it because it's making the child associate learning and words with a good thing, mom, and the comfort of being near mom and cuddling in mom's arms and hearing her voice. I'm 57 years old, and I still to this day, if I close my eyes, I can hear my mother's voice reading me my favorite children's books. And it's a warm, wonderful feeling. And I think that might have been part of what made me become a professor, just wanting to give that to other people.
Oh, for sure. And I know that when my daughter was born, I ended up being a stay-at-home mom for the first 18 months of her life, in part because I really wanted to give her that kind of attention, and also in part because I am not capable of working a full-time job and coming home and being a full-time parent and doing all of those things and remaining mentally healthy and well while doing it. I
Yes.
knew that, and that I have always had severe insomnia, and adding a newborn baby to that was going to make it so that I was not functionally capable of living a life. So,
Right.
for the first 18 months that she was alive, I stepped back to be a stay-at-home mom for my own health and for her well-being. And everything I did with her in tow. And she stood next to me on a chair while we washed dishes together. And
Hmm.
we would sit in the bed and I would pick like 15 or 20 of her books and spread them out. And she could pick one up and I would read it to her. And like we had all of those moments. And I didn't turn on the TV for her for the first year that she was alive.
Right.
And I was able to give her that because I was not stressed to the point of exhaustion from having to work all day and come home
Hmm.
and do all of that. Like the fact that I was able to make her a priority was absolutely a privilege for me.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
understand that. But I was only able to do that for her because I was not forced to work while I was trying to do all of that.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's and obviously I know your daughter very well. And oh boy, did she benefit from that. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, but they talk about and they had some excellent statistics in this documentary, and they mentioned how every week more than 11 million children under the age of 5 spend more than half their waking hours under the care of someone who is not their parent.
Right.
So 11 million children across the country are spending more than half of their waking hours with teachers and grandparents and babysitters, and like
Right.
that's not necessarily a horrible thing. Like
Hmm.
if you have loving, caring grandparents and teachers who are really invested in the outcomes for your child and they really love your children, that can be a positive. But at the same time, like nobody loves your kids like you do. Nobody has,
Right.
you know, their best interest at heart the way you do. So that was an interesting statistic to see, especially when you take into account the extraordinary cost of care for children under 5.
Right. And it was interesting because as someone who does not have children, watching this documentary made me realize, wow, they really, yeah, they do grow out of their shoes every year and they need a new wardrobe every year. And, wow, that does add up, just and yeah, it must be exhausting for a new mom, and a new dad, obviously. Not to mention, I looked this up as well. Lower income families have a much higher rate of divorce than higher income families.
I believe it.
Um, yeah, and so a lot of these kids now they're only being raised by one parent, who has to work two or three jobs. Younger children are being raised by their older brothers and sisters. They're being raised by the 15 and 16-year-old, which is terrifying.
Yep, in many cases, and the stress of having to live this life where everything is built around work and you're not earning enough money to cover your
Yeah,
bills and you're paying more than you pay on your mortgage every month to put your kid in daycare so that you can go to work. Like the stress that puts on a relationship has got to be insane.
yeah,
So I can see why that would be an issue.
yeah,
But they even talk about like this is so important because when your kids get into school and they're at a competitive level where they're now surrounded by kids of all different, economic types and all of that, a lower income fourth grader who is already behind in reading is 13 times more likely to drop out of high school was
yeah.
the statistic that they used. And when I went and looked at that, that came from the springboardcollaborative.org, and
Hmm.
they talked about how when your kid is behind, when your kid is not reading at level or speaking at the grade level, they are gaining less from the education they're being
Hmm.
given because it's not meeting them where they're at. And they're falling even further behind as the kids around them are absorbing this education that they cannot absorb.
Yeah. They never catch up. They start behind, falling behind, like you said, in fourth grade. They are not going to catch up. The gap is just going to get wider and wider and wider. And I absolutely understand why they'd be dropping out. They're frustrated. They're frustrated, they feel stupid, they don't understand why they're not getting it when the kid to their left and their right, is getting it. They're functionally illiterate, but they don't know that, because I mean, obviously they have verbal skills, but sure, I absolutely understand why that would happen. They just want to go, just drop out, do the bare minimum, and then go to work like mom or like dad or like and never have to deal with this scary school situation anymore.
Yeah, and I think the words functionally illiterate are a
Hmm.
very important part of this because there are huge numbers of people who can read. Like if you put a page of text in front of them, they can read the words, they can read them out loud, but they don't comprehend the information that they're taking in from reading. Like
Exactly.
the they would not identify themselves as illiterate, but if they can't comprehend what they're reading, they are functionally illiterate.
Yeah.
And so the number of people, and you can tell this when you argue with people online or if you post a comment on something, the responses you get, you're like, you clearly did not understand what I was saying. And you're arguing with me something about that's a completely different topic, has nothing to do with what I said.
Right.
This is more common than you'd think.
Oh, absolutely. It, people are mighty brave in cyberspace, But yes, I mean, it's difficult arguing with somebody that doesn't understand what you're arguing about, because it's almost like, all right, well, do I have to explain the issue, and then argue about it? It's yeah.
Yeah. And then they talked to John Wetzel. Let me pull up
Mhm.
his information. He was the gentleman, the secretary of the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections.
Right.
And he had talked about how kids who drop out of high school are 50% more likely to be unemployed than high school
Hmm.
graduates, and they're 8 times more likely to be incarcerated. And he talked about how prison is the most expensive and least effective way to address these societal issues, and that
Exactly.
investment in early childhood education um, can help keep people out of prison. It can help
Hmm.
keep people employed. Like the money that we're spending to incarcerate people, if we would spend it to educate children, we wouldn't have to spend it to incarcerate people.
Incarcerate people. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, make the investment 20 years earlier, you know and yeah, make the investment 20 years earlier, and then see how the prison population changes. Prisons wouldn't be as overcrowded. I mean, a lot of the problems that we're facing with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, they would be alleviated as well, having
They
a less
would.
yeah, sure.
Um, and it when we talk about investing in early childhood education, that should involve paying the teachers a living wage. That
Amen.
should involve, making sure that everybody who is involved in the education of those children is capable and functional and happy and has the ability to pay their bills. Like we seem to be asking of a lot of different industries. The people who do the work don't get any money. And
Right.
there's no ability to track where these funds are going, and all the shareholders are just seeing, incredible boons every quarter. So, yeah, if we could take the money that is being given to the shareholders, the people who own stock in early childhood education companies, and gave that to the teachers, I think
Yeah.
we would see a much better educational experience for children.
Oh, nobody goes into teaching for the money. Absolutely not.
Right, but a
It
lot of people leave teaching because there's no money.
because there's no money. A couple of years ago, I met a girl from the UK, when we were at the Kerouac Festival, actually in Massachusetts, and she had come all the way from England to go to this thing. And when she found out I was a professor, she like glommed onto me, and she's like, Tell me about all the money that you make. And after I stopped laughing, um, I had to explain America doesn't value education as much as we should. Certainly not with this administration. We have somebody in office that wants to dismantle the Department of Education. So there you go. I'm afraid it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Oh, it's going to get significantly worse before it
Mhm.
gets better. Um, and I don't know how we can go about fixing these problems. And I mean, they talk about within this documentary, they were very, very upfront. If you were born into poverty, the odds are good you're going to be an adult in poverty.
Yeah.
And that, the prison is, they got into the school to prison pipeline, and they talked about some of that. They talked about how 71% of people age 17 to 24 nationwide are
Hmm.
ineligible to join our military, largely due to education issues or nutrition issues or criminal issues,
Hmm.
all of which kind of accumulate from the school systems or can be addressed within the school systems. And if a kid can't qualify to join the military, they probably can't qualify to work at a major corporation, or like they're going to
Sure.
be limited to
Right.
retail work, restaurant work. They're going to be limited to the lowest paying sectors of the
Hmm.
economy.
And I think it is extremely important that our military members be literate and well versed in that sort of thing. That sort of thing. I cannot imagine not being eligible for military service due to an educational problem. It should not be happening in a first world country at all, and it should not be happening in what is allegedly the, and I'm doing air quotes, greatest country in the world.
Yeah.
That's not acceptable. It's not acceptable.
Yeah. And they talked about how a lot of what you learn in early childhood education is not um, book learning, but you're
Right.
learning executive function and how to sit still and how to be patient and how to follow instructions and kind of all of that, how to work within a group to be able to receive that education.
Hmm.
And that part of the documentary had by far my favorite celebrity guest I think I've ever seen on a documentary, because Cookie Monster came to demonstrate executive functioning abilities.
Yes. That I thought I was tripping heavily when I saw Cookie Monster sidle in, photobomb the thing, I was like, oh, this ought to be good.
And it was, because Cookie Monster is amazing. But they
Yes.
talked about the techniques that they use to teach kids these things. And they talked about,
Hmm.
the importance of investing, because these are skills that are apply everywhere, not just in the classroom. And I was just so excited to see one of my favorite Sesame Street Muppets uh, join this documentary.
Yeah, and it worked. He got to have his whole plate of cookies because he was patient while the woman was explaining what she was doing. And he sat there very patiently and he got his whole plate of cookies. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it ended well for everybody, really. I mean,
Well, and they talked about how within that section, they talked about how executive function skills are better predictors of not only school achievement, but how well you're going to do later in life, just in general.
hmm.
It's a better predictor than IQ or anything. Like your ability to have executive function skills is
Hmm.
what sets you up to be successful later in life. And as somebody who's married to a person with ADHD, yeah, I can see that.
Mm.
Like where if your executive function skills are interrupted or not as robust as other people's because of, you know, lack of education or ADHD or whatever is causing that, it makes it hard to just remember and focus on the basics of day-to-day life.
Yeah, I mean, I also have to say that I think that considering Cookie Monster's nutritional habits, he wouldn't be eligible for the military either.
That's fair.
But
The military will not just feed you cookies.
but he doesn't have fingers either, so he couldn't even like pull a trigger or anything. It's like,
So the Muppet Brigade is out.
the Muppets are out. There's not going to be military Muppets. Oh God.
But then they talked about toxic stress and
Yes.
when children face fear and adversity and they don't have a caregiver to step in and help, they start to have health problems from that. And about
Mm-hmm.
how it encourages you to be hyper independent and unable to ask for help from other people. It causes like stress related illness within your body. And I had to pause and be like, did this documentary just explain why I am who I am? Like, did they just identify why?
See, now that's interesting. I mean, as a speaking as a former bullied kid to the point where I had to go to therapy at age 12, my mom was that mom that always went to the principal's office. I think my parents were in that school more than I was. They because every time somebody gave me grief, they were in there to try to solve the problem. And unfortunately, at least in my school district, the teachers and the administration sided with the popular kids, AKA the rich kids,
Yeah.
whose parents were active in the PTA and the PTO and were chaperones and volunteered and all, and everything. I mean, and there I was, very, lower middle class, and my family wasn't taken seriously, you know,
Yeah. And I mean,
unfortunately.
and it's not to say that my parents did not step up and help. I mean, obviously they did. My parents were loving, wonderful people, and treated me very well when I was a child. But like that stress that comes from. I mean, I know that when I was a kid, I was put in daycare and preschool and all of that immediately as an infant,
Mm,
and did not have adults to step in when I was dealing with some of the stresses that come with being a kid when you're learning how to interact with the world around you. And I
mhm.
remember being bullied terribly at assorted daycares and things. I remember being forced to sit down. I was maybe 4 and I was forced to sit down and watch the cartoon Watership Down because that's what the daycare had rented to show the children.
That's
And I
highly inappropriate.
Yes, it is. The fact that it has cartoon bunnies does not make it for children.
No,
And,
no.
like I remember I turned around. I sat there, I covered my ears and I turned around and faced the back wall for like 90 minutes because
Mhm.
they were forcibly showing children Watership Down and
Oh
not
my God.
one adult, not one, counselor or teacher or anything stepped in and was like, "Hey, maybe we don't do this." So,
And the fact that you remember this 35, 40 years later,
oh yeah.
that tells me a lot about how much that traumatized you. No, certainly. I mean, the oh God, how horrible for you,
Yeah.
because there was no adult there to explain it's just make believe, or oh, this is upsetting you, let's take you out of the room, or let's go over here and do an activity together. Is anybody else not interested in this? Okay, let's all make a little group over here. If you want to keep watching the movie, you do that, but people who don't, kids who don't, we can do something over here. It would have
Yeah.
been so easy.
It would have been so easy. And the fact that nobody stepped in, like I have a feeling that a lot of the toxic stress that I deal with that I feel like helped contribute to my anxiety issues and stuff, um, came from being in preschools and daycares and things where people were doing the best that they could, but
Yeah,
it was not, they didn't have the right number of adults. They didn't have adults who were prioritizing the needs of the kids. Like it wasn't my mom taking care of
yeah,
me. So,
exactly.
that's, it was a lot. And I know that had they had higher paying positions, had the teachers been paid double or triple what they were paying, they would have had fully educated
Mhm.
education experts who were there and could have stepped in and would have known what to do. Like, but I remember it was like teenagers, like kids in college and stuff who were there helping with the kids at the daycare.
Right.
So, yeah, that toxic stress is a very serious issue and
Yeah.
one that I think lower income students and students who have a higher need for the early education, early childhood education stuff probably deal with at a much higher rates.
Oh, I absolutely can see why that would be. Sure.
they mentioned at one point, why, or we can't transform the lives of children if we can't transform the lives of their families as well.
Yeah.
And they talked about how you can put these kids in early childhood education all day and with the very best teachers, but if their home life is not good, if it's not what it needs to be, it's not going to be enough. And
Right.
that's when we saw the people in Waco where they were going from house to house, helping people who were not meeting their children's needs, helping them learn how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. What a wonderful idea. But again, they're civil servants. They're not being paid a great deal of money to do this. So
Yeah,
again, nobody is going to go, I'm going to quit my six-figure a year job and go door to door in poor neighborhoods and risk being mugged and this, that, and the other thing for a crappy civil service. What? No, unfortunately, you know.
yeah. But when they were just addressing all of these pieces and how it all kind of fits together, it was very clear that household income was a major predictor of what kind of education you were going to get, whether you were going to come into the school system at the same level as other kids.
Hmm.
And they talked about even in the beginning, they talked to oh, what were their names? They were, yes, so the Johnson family, Larry Johnson and his wife Juanica, who she was a special ed teacher, and they had
Hmm.
their little girl, and she really wanted to stay home with their daughter, and she couldn't. They couldn't afford it, and they had to
Of
send
course.
her to, you know, preschool or daycare, and they showed how she had to get up so early. She had to wake up this poor screaming baby who was not ready to be awake yet to force her to go
Right.
drop with somebody who was not her mom. And then they showed kind of later how the school system was so helpful to her and it was a good, healthy environment for her to be in. But at the same time, like she didn't want that wasn't what their family wanted. But yeah, it was so hard to watch some of these. Like they talked to Donnie and Sharon Poff. They had the son Damien, who when he was born, he was in the NICU for 22 days. They ended up with $925,000 in hospital bills,
I,
and
I,
they were working alternate shifts. So one of them would be home with him, and the other one would be at work, and then they would switch off. So that they did not have to pay for after school care, but they essentially weren't seeing each other,
hmm.
and they were dealing with the stress of having to, how do you sleep? When do you fit sleep in there?
Right, exactly. I mean, not to mention, you need a strong connection between mom and dad when you have a sickly child. Because unfortunately that child is probably going to have health issues, forever because of what, of what he went through in the hospital. And, if mom and dad don't even see each other, or talk to each other about their child, it's just tragic. It's setting everyone up for failure.
It absolutely is, and it
Mhm.
was nice to see that that they wanted so badly to be able to take care of their family and that they found a way to make it work. But at the same time, what were they giving up to make it work in that way? Like I don't know how what their future is going to look like for Damien based on the situation that he was in,
Exactly.
and how hard must that be? How hard can it be to have to try to find a way to move up in your career or kind of build when this is the life you're living?
Who was the kid? Oh God, he made me laugh so hard. The little boy who wanted to know if he'd be able to make his own decisions when he was 52. It was like such a random number. It's like 52. Of course, to a kid that age, everybody between the ages of 10 and 100 are the same age. But
Yeah,
he
little
just
kids
picked,
have no concept of
no,
time or age.
no, but he just picked 52 out of nowhere. And his dad was like, yes. Then he was
Yeah, I
like,
did.
oh, son, you got a long way to go, though. You know? Like, what did you think? I wanted to ask you this. What did you think? What do you think about the fact that so many more people are working from home now because after COVID, we found out we could do that. And employers found out that their employees were more productive working from home and they were happier working from home. Well, now they can at least be in the same room as their children. If there's an immediate crisis, they can log off of their work and go and take. Do you think this might improve a little bit with
I
that?
think it improves tremendously in that. I
Oh,
know that
good.
I have been in meetings, like Zoom meetings with people, and they've got their toddler in their lap or their baby on their shoulder, and they're having a meeting while holding their child. So their kid is getting that interaction with mom or dad, and then they can turn them to the camera and be like, "See, this is my friend, and this is, we're talking," and like the kid can interact in that way, and for people to be able to even to be at home, like, so you have to hire a nanny or a babysitter to come sit with your young child, but if there's an emergency, you're there, and if they need to come hug mom because they're feeling sad and anxious and
Yeah,
scared, they're there. I think work from home in that way, um it's probably made a huge difference with this. And I would be interested to
good.
see them go back and talk to some of these families, because this obviously had to be filmed before 2020.
Right, right.
So when 2020 hit and all of these people then were able to maybe work from home or adjust things, like, was that did that give them a chance to be with their kids more? Did that give them a chance to supplement education at home,
Hmm.
or all of that stuff? I feel like that would be a really interesting question to ask them.
Yeah, I mean, and also that's a lot less the working from home. That's good for both the child and the parent because, I mean, I'm sure that you missed your daughter when she wasn't around, when she was in school. I mean, my mom said that once I went to kindergarten when I was 5 years old. She was like, I missed you so much. I was like, kindergarten's half a day. I was gone for 3 hours,
Well,
you know.
I as a parent, you do really miss your kid, and your kid needs to interact with other people and build their own life, and like,
Right. Sure.
so when you're doing this work from home with your kid from home, you do have to set up, okay, I'm going to get them involved in sports, and I'm going to get them involved in theater. I'm going to get them like,
Hmm.
you have to actively work to build those skills that they develop outside the home. But it's possible. But it is so nice to spend time with my child. I think she's a pretty great person. I love spending time with her.
I
So
do too.
it's one of those things where I am so glad that for right now, at least, we continue to have the opportunity to spend our days together. But yeah, we have these moments, and I think work from home, not only does it make it easier in that way, it removes your commute. So the 2 hours a day that you would have spent in your
Yeah,
car, not with your child, you're at
right,
home teaching your child how to cook because they're standing there next to you at the stove. Or
right.
you're getting up in the morning at a reasonable hour and not hating life.
Yeah,
And you,
yeah.
you can, it makes such a big difference in everything. And I know some people really have to be in the office. They don't function if they can't remove themselves from their home environment. I am very much the opposite, where if I am in an office, I am less productive and capable of less than if I could just work from
Oh,
home.
okay. I don't have the discipline. I would need to be actually in a place where I'd have to get dressed. But that's okay. That's how I work. That's fine. That's fine. But I mean, and you mentioned about the commute. I mean, not only that, but those are 2 hours that could also be spent sleeping,
Yes.
having some me time. Listen to music you like or something, or take your time getting dressed and not be the slave to the alarm that we all are in this country. Definitely.
Yeah, and I am hopeful that working from home would be helpful for people in this way.
Yeah.
But whether you're working from home or working in an office or working in a school or a mall or wherever it is that you're putting in your time, um, the larger issues here, that we're not funding education for children, we're not giving people who do the vital work that is necessary to make our country run. None of those people are earning any kind of money. Like,
Right.
this is a larger problem. Um, put it very plainly, that we're not putting the needs of the American people first. And
Right.
if we were, the needs of the American children should be at the top of that list.
Absolutely. I mean, we're only as strong as the upcoming generation because we're going to die eventually. And then the country will be in the hands of these children that are still too functionally illiterate to join the military. That scares me. And it
Yeah.
doesn't mean they're certainly not lazy or or stupid or anything like that. They didn't have the opportunities. They didn't have the opportunity, and they didn't have the money, and they didn't have the means, and they didn't have, the resources. Um, and I just find that very sad, very scary, and it's just, you know, I don't know what's going to happen.
Well, when I look back in American history and you look at like pictures of little kids working in mines or
Yeah.
the like 14-year-old girls who were working at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory or
Oh,
like
yes, yes,
that
the
kind of
Triangle
thing.
Shirtwaist Factory. Yep, exactly.
Um,
Before there were child labor laws, it was like, can you sign your name? That's all you need to do, son. Here, you're a chimney sweep now, or something. Yeah.
we left that behind because we understood that well, because we fought the oligarchs, but the people fighting the oligarchs understood that if these children did not get an education, they could not contribute to the world in a real way, that we needed healthy kids who had a chance to grow up and learn something and develop an education and a personality and all of that before they were thrown into the working world to be the strongest nation in the world.
Right,
And we seem to be going away from that at this point.
right. Well, I mean, when No Child Left Behind was passed in 2001, I remember that day like it was yesterday. I said, in about 15 years, this is going to be a problem for me. And it was, because the solution to just keep pushing them through, some children should be left behind because they need another go round. I mean, of course, and I think that contributes to the dropout rate as well. It's like, well, never got the hang of adding. Let's move on now to algebra. No, not gonna work.
Yeah, I feel like things are typically put in place with good intentions,
Hmm.
but No Child Left Behind, I feel like it was pretty obvious that you can't just keep passing people and you can't keep funding based on how well you score on tests and your overall grade point average, because the people who need the most funding are the people who are
Hmm.
scoring the lowest. So when you
Yeah.
say if you can't score high enough, we're going to take your money away, that's the opposite of
Right.
what should be
Yeah.
done.
Well,
That
it's all about the numbers, the test, the test, the test. I used to do a unit on standardized testing in my argument persuasion class, and every single student I had said that it was absolutely worthless, because it didn't prepare them to get into the college world. It prepared them to take that one test, so then the school would be able to actually be able to buy enough textbooks to go around, and I mean, they lost sight of the goal, I think.
or they had different goals than
Yeah.
the people, because I mean they talked about all the things that they talked about in this documentary, but about how by the first day of kindergarten, higher income kids are already as much as 2 years ahead in language development than other kids. And they
Yep.
talked about how just 10% of the child care in America is considered high quality. And they got into how funding is so important to this and how money is kind of the crux of this issue, but none of the solutions that people were
Hmm.
offering involved more funding.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like I was saying, when we talk about prison, it's like, yeah, maybe we should invest the money 20 years earlier, but nobody wants to do that,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
But so it looks like as far as this goes, I really enjoyed this documentary a lot. I thought it was fun. I thought they did an excellent job of showcasing the people and the experts really well. And I really loved seeing the teachers, especially
Yes.
the woman who helped the children. They went out to be bug detectives, and
To look at bugs and identify them. You know, that's a great learning mechanism. You pair it with an activity. They get to go outside of the class. We never went outside when I was in elementary school, only for recess. We never went outside. It was really depressing. But yeah, they got to be bug detectives. They found an egg sack, and I was like, oh yay. And then she's like, let's bring it back in the classroom and watch it hatch. I was like, oh God, yeah, sure, let's do that. You know,
but the kids loved it and they were
they
learning
did,
so much.
yeah.
And they invented the kid game show Solve That Problem, where
I
they would,
loved Solve That Problem.
yeah,
Loved
they
it.
modeled the problems and then had the kids help figure out how that they should solve them. And then they
Hmm.
could reference back, do you remember when we played Solve That Problem and this came up? Well, now this is how you use this and you're in this conversation with your friend who wants your toy. Like
Yeah,
they did a really excellent job. I thought the educators were just spectacular. Um, and it was so nice to see. And this one, I think, might be the only documentary that we may ever watch that um, had it was a bipartisan support. They
yeah,
talked about how people from both major political parties, from everywhere in the political spectrum, seems to understand the value of early childhood education and the importance of early childhood education, um, at least of the voting public. The decision-making people seem to care less. But
yeah, of course. Yeah, certainly. Well, the decision-making people, I mean, they kind of benefit from a clueless society in
yeah,
many ways, unfortunately.
but they talked about how like 97% of Democrats thought that this was a really great idea, and like 89% of Republicans thought that this was a
Right,
really great idea, and like how this is a topic or a concept that kind of everybody is in agreement that this is important. And so
right.
when we had that momentum as a group to move forward in that way, had COVID not happened in 2020,
Hmm.
and we maybe had the ability to push for this kind of thing, where if we this had been able to stay a priority, I wonder how different things would have been.
Yeah, yeah. I think that what you said about how I that you wish there was a follow-up or you could find these people, and I think that would be wonderful. 5 years later, where is everybody now? Has it changed, in either attitude or function? Definitely.
Yep. And I also am interested. I really want to see them do a documentary like this now, because what I've been seeing among the teachers that I know and the like online groups that I see people talking in, it seems like something has significantly reduced executive functioning abilities in small children. If
Hmm.
I would guess that it is COVID,
Yeah,
this constant infection with a disease that is a vascular and respiratory issue and all of that. It's probably making it difficult for them to, develop a developmentally appropriate.
hmm,
I'm sure there are other potential explanations and all of that, but I'm seeing people who are like, kids are coming into my kindergarten and they're not potty trained, or
yeah,
I am like getting kids in my preschool and they can't hold a crayon or like things like that. It seems like something in this, past 5 years, 6 years or so has really slowed down the development of children, at least, in
yeah. No, I think you're right. I have a cousin that had recently had a baby, and I went to visit her and the baby when the baby was only a day and a half old, and they're still in the hospital, and his eyes weren't even open yet, and she actually said, "I'm sorry he doesn't do much yet." I was like, "He's 36 hours old. he's still trying to like grasp this whole being alive thing. You you know. And then the poor child got what is it? RSV? What
RSV,
is it?
yeah.
Yeah, RSV. And we were all very, thank God he's okay. He's completely fine. But we're like, oh God, are we gonna like have oxygen deprivation now? For this little tiny, tiny little brain that's like just starting out, and everything is, is he going to be doomed from day two? But fortunately that did not happen. But, like you were saying, with the pneumonias and the COVID and the flu and like
Well, and
all
now
this,
the measles is making a comeback, and tuberculosis is making its way through the
and
United States.
whooping cough.
Like
Yay.
all of these things that we have understood for generations how to not have these things.
Yeah.
Vaccinations have been a very important tool, and all of a sudden everybody has decided that they're on team stupid and
Yeah.
it's fine
Yes,
to get sick.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, and I truly wonder how much all of these diseases constantly battering small children is impacting their ability to function
Yeah.
in the way that kids did 15, 20, 30 years ago.
That's an excellent question. I would love to know that. Yeah.
Yeah. But this was definitely an interesting documentary to watch. I'm glad that we watched this. This was another one that was
Definitely.
a little bit more fun than
Yes.
some of the
It
alternatives.
wasn't a total drag like the other ones that we've been doing lately.
But thanks for listening to Real Stories, Real Problems with your hosts, Rachel and Roxanne. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into early childhood education and the documentary No Small Matter. Join us again next week for a glimpse into another financial problem and a documentary all about it. If you enjoyed our show today, please remember to like, subscribe, and leave us a review on your podcast app. Thanks for listening. See you again
Mhm.
next week.